Welcome to Salute to the Years, where my family and I discuss everything Disney, from parks, food, and rides to travel tips, movies, and more. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Salute to the Years. And it has been a crazy 24 hours.
This has been probably the most news that has dropped out of Disney that is shocking and not expected in a while.
Right. Say not expected, but hoped for by many.
Okay, if you guys are not aware, Disney announced yesterday that CEO Bob Chapek is no longer the CEO of Disney.
Mm-hmm.
He is been let go, as well as his right-hand man. And Bob Iger, who is the former CEO and board chairman, is back under a new 2-year contract. And so news hit last night that this all went down officially yesterday, and everybody has gone.
It about broke Twitter.
And Twitter's already on thin ice right now as it is, but it about broke Twitter. And I can't explain the range of emotions even within our own household that were felt last night over this news.
Right. Now, we're not necessarily going to sit here and bash Bob Chapek, because he is a person and he did just lose his job. Mm-hmm. But we're not going to feel completely sorry for him either, because he's leaving with like $23 million.
Yeah. So because of his new contract that was done in June, I believe.
Right.
He had severance package planned in there. I mean, big contracts like that always include things like that. Jobs of that nature always include,
a severance
clause. And so he's going to be fine for Christmas. He'll be okay.
Yeah.
And honestly, I think my biggest hope for him out of this is that it's a wake-up call to how he led. So we're not here to bash him, but I'm not upset.
No.
I'm in shock, but I'm not sad.
There are several aspects of things that he put in place that, for many, has taken away the magic of the parks. Mm-hmm. But it's just not the parks. Yeah. Hollywood wasn't happy with him. Mm-hmm. The Disney Company themselves, his employees, his cast members, were not happy with him.
Imagineers were not happy.
Imagineers were furious, frustrated.
Leaving storied careers in Imagineering, and I just there's been a lot of hurt. There's a lot of hurt that's happened, and here's the thing. I mean, you get into a position like that in a title like that, you're gonna tick some people off. You're gonna hurt some people. It's the nature of business of that scale. Right. Is that you're not going to please everybody. There's no way that he ever could. Iger's not going to please everybody. No. I can remember us being so frustrated with Iger at one point. So, I mean, it's not a perfect system by any means. However, we want to talk about just kind of some of the things, that we're seeing come out of this. Mm-hmm. Thoughts, feelings, stuff that we've seen, happening with this news. And then also talk about a little bit of what we want to see maybe happen. Like, what does this mean for some of these future, future projects, stuff that's been on hold, stuff that's currently in the works? Like, where is this going? Kind of our projections of what's coming up. Yeah,
of what's coming up. And some of the stuff may be stuff we'd like to see, maybe rumors that we've heard. We'll try and let you know, hey, this is just a rumor. But there's other stuff that's starting to leak out of, no, this is really what's going on.
Yeah.
And I think that one of the first things we're really going to run into, that we're going to see, is Bob Iger going on some kind of a media tour. One of the major aspects of what may have led to this change now is the stocks are crashing. And economic experts were talking about how Disney was going to be on thin ice and it was only going to keep going down and it was going to get worse. Yeah. That's where the board members make a lot of their money, is through stocks. Yeah. And Bob now has Bob Iger.
I think we're going to have to refer to them as Iger and Chapek.
He now has the tough job of, one, bringing consumer confidence back up to the point to where stocks that they rise again, right? Yeah. And continue to make a profit for the company.
Well, and so here's one thing. Iger did put out a statement today, an official statement. One, he had first big act, which was removing Chapek's right-hand man, Kareem Daniel. And he put out a statement, and here's the thing. Stocks already went up 6% today, which they haven't done in a hot minute. Right. And some of that is just, hurricanes have come through, and
and part of it is the excitement of Iger coming back, and he's a known commodity.
Right. So his one of the things that he said today as part of his memo, he said they're bringing in a new structure that puts more decision making back in the hands of our creative teams and rationalizes costs. This will necessitate a reorganization of Disney media and entertainment distribution. As a result, Kareem Daniel will be leaving the company. So there is a restructuring that's coming, and I think as part of that restructuring, you're right, that there's going to have to be some interviews, media tours, big news stations, all the things, all the big shows of being like, yeah, this is where we're going. This is what we want to do. Right. And explaining not the details of the restructuring, but the overall, like the why. Right. To some extent. I don't think we're going to see it though until after Thanksgiving. Partly because so many of those things already have such a lineup for this week done. Yeah. We'll see some of it, but we're not going to see the big media tour, I don't think, until next week.
Right. We might get, like he sent a letter out to the cast members today, right? Right. We might get something like that, like a letter that comes out to the public, or something quick that just hits social media. But he's on it's a very tough spot for him of being able to please your consumers and please the board. That's a tough thing to do with the hole that he's in right now.
Here's the only thing I'll say about that. I think Iger has a better handle on who the board is. Right. And kind of, for lack of a better term, how to manage them. Right. I use the term very loosely, as far as because any corporate relationship like that you're in, to some degree, you are managing expectations, you're managing relationships, you're managing, the structure of how things go. I think he has a better handle on how the board, how the leadership teams, how the structure of the company runs than Chapek did. Right. And it's hard too, though. You've had some people who have said, okay, but Chapek was supposed to be Iger's replacement, and he was, he apparently had a hand in training. He was training him, and he was walking alongside him and doing these things.
He did.
And
he was the one that Iger picked. That was Iger's pick to be.
So do we just chalk this up to that was a mistake? That was my bad.
Kind of, but I think it also comes down to, it's tough to know how people are going to act in a leadership position like that. Yes, he was in charge of the parks, but he still had to answer to Iger, right? Mm-hmm. Iger still had to make those tough decisions. When he was finally put in that spot to make those tough decisions, you don't know how people are going to act.
That's true.
And when you act by just reacting to the numbers and the analytics and the dollar signs, you completely miss out on the emotion and the magic and the creativity that comes from Disney World not necessarily Disney World, but the Disney Company in general.
You made a good analogy earlier. You were explaining to somebody how kind of this, this whole leadership structure of it works. And I think that this is a good analogy as far as like the type of leader we feel that Chapek was based on
so
how this all went out.
One of my other big passions is sports. Mm-hmm. And I really like how teams are built and put together. And the things I have noticed, and other people have noticed this too, I'm not just like hey, listen to me. More and more sports are getting driven by the analytics, by the numbers, by the like deep dive mathematic numbers of it. And now they're starting to kind of come back a little bit to where, yes, you got to have these analytics. You got to look at the numbers.
Yeah.
But you also have to be able to look at how a team is made, the emotion, the character. If you're just strictly...
You have to look at the relationships. You have to look at, like... Okay, you can't just throw, two guys together and be like, well, you're top athletes, so just perform.
Right.
Like, and not take into account any of the things that are happening within their lives or happened in their lives into account as far as, like, how they're going to gel together on a team.
Right.
And work together. Just
because it makes sense with the numbers on the paper, it doesn't always translate to the field or the court or whatever you're playing. Like... There's more to it to develop that chemistry, just like Disney is not just a regular business. Mm-hmm. Disney is a entertainment business, which is driven by its cast members and the consumer. The consumer wants more whenever there's magic moments. Mm-hmm. There's things that tug on their heart. There's things that draw them in. And when you continue to just ask them to pay for more and give them less of a product, sooner or later, your demand's going to run out.
That bubble's going to burst at some point, and it already was starting to. We were already starting to see some of that trail off. And, of course, you look at the numbers and you look and go, okay, well, Disney had this, massive year profit-wise, and, events and things are still selling out, and rooms are selling out, and, you've got all these things that are happening, but at the same, what was it? Magic Key came back for what? A day and a half?
48 hours.
Yeah. And they took it back down because they sold so many of them. Right. Yes, there is still a demand. And yes, people are still willing to pay for it. Mm-hmm. However, you have more people who have said no when they had the opportunity to still renew their annual passes, said, nope, I'm out. You had more people who have said, no, we won't take a long family vacation there.
Right.
We're going to go do something else, or we're going to, and you are losing talent.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, that is the biggest thing for me too. I mean, like, yes, us as the consumer, like, please produce a product that we want to buy. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, you are losing talent. Right. You are losing out on talented people who are going to go, A, either work for the other park.
Right.
Or B, they're just not even willing to come there and even attempt it because of the atmosphere that you have created. Mm-hmm. So one of the things we heard about last night when the news broke, and then even into today, is that the atmosphere of cast members was one of just hope and elation.
Right.
And there's just this weight lifted off of them.
Right. They feel like the person who's in charge
cares.
Values them.
Yeah.
When you don't value your employees or
all the way down,
for me, like military wise, when you don't value your Jimmies and Joes, you're not going to get a good platoon. You're not going to get a good unit.
And you're not going to get the results that you are expecting to get out of them.
Right. Now they know that they're getting somebody who values them.
Well, and truly wants to see it succeed.
Right.
For the long term, not just to see it succeed to line their own pockets.
Right.
Iger's fine.
Yeah.
He is completely fine without taking on this role.
Right.
Like, financially. So that, I think that makes a difference.
Yeah.
age-wise and all of that. Like, I don't know. There's just something about it.
Well, part of it is with Iger. We'll get back to the cast members here in a second, but part of it is with Iger. A lot of his retirement money is tied up in shares of Disney.
Oh, yeah.
He has a lot of shares of Disney. But that's why, like, his salary for the next 2 years came out. He's getting paid $1 million. Like, each year for the next 2 years. Yes, $1 million is a lot of money. Like, all of us would be, like, ecstatic to have $1 million. But compared to what he was getting paid,
or even compared to Chapek's severance.
Right. That's nothing. To be the CEO of a massive, massive, massive company, $1 million.
Severance is 23 times what Iger's salary is going to be.
Right.
That's insane to me. I'm like, all I can think through is like, how many people could you hire? How many things could you do? How many things could you improve and maintain?
Right.
And just make sure that everything is like great,
right,
and steady and there for the long term and gonna hold out. How many things could you do,
right,
with $22 million? Right.
Well, like, one of the things you could do is raise the pay of the cast members.
Yeah,
they desperately need it. I don't know that bringing Iger in is necessarily going to get them a pay raise, but I think it gives them more hope that something can get done.
I think that but like I said, I think that's what it is. The feeling around the parks today was one for cast members.
Right.
And even as far as like the Imagineers and stuff, I think was all just of hope.
Right.
It was just like room to breathe. Right. Like, so Brooklyn and I both have asthma. And this is something that you experienced a little bit, like after your injury of like the, really feeling like you can't breathe or
when
having
a lung doesn't
damage.
Work, that's what happens.
The aspect of like when you're really stressed and, and if any of you have asthma, like you understand this, like when your chest gets tight and it feels like you can't just totally exhale and you can't bring in a deep breath and you can't, it just makes everything else so much more intense.
Oh yeah.
Like it doesn't just affect that. It affects every other part of you. And I think about that as far as like why everybody was so elated today and why everybody was so just had this like sigh of relief was not because Chapek was like just this horrible evil person, but because he did not instill hope.
Right.
And it was a weight for so many people. The way that he led was such a weight and such a stress for so many people that as soon as you removed that,
right.
It's like taking an inhaler when you have asthma. It's like as soon as you get that, it's like, okay.
Yeah, I saw somebody describe this really well. They said, Iger's not going to come in and magically fix this immediately.
No.
But what he does do is he restores that magic, that patina that goes around the Disney company that may only be on the surface because you don't see what's underneath it, but he restores that. And that's what people were missing with Chapek.
Oh, yeah. There just wasn't the creativity aspect.
No.
He really had just done so much damage to the creativity aspect of it. They don't work. It's a balance, right? It's a balance of creativity versus the business side of things.
Right.
And if you do not allow those two things to remain in a fluid balance, it doesn't work.
Right. That's why some of the best leaders of this company have actually been teams. Mm-hmm. It's Walt's dreams were so big that he needed Roy to help him figure out how to finance them. And he had to rein some of them in. I mean, you hear the stories of Walt had to file for bankruptcy. Like, he was broke multiple times because his dreams were so big.
Yeah.
Roy desperately wanted Walt's dreams to come true, and he helped figure out the business aspect for him. Walt grew into being a good businessman, but that was because of Roy.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And even Roy said Walt was the dreams.
Oh, yeah.
So
it took both sides of it, and it
does.
Is. It just if you don't include both sides, it's not going to happen.
Right, and it happened again with Eisner and Wells.
Oh yeah.
Eisner was the creativity part. Wells was really the good businessman. They made a great team. And then when Wells died suddenly, and Eisner had to take on that business part, was kind of like his downfall. He started focusing more on that business side, and that wasn't his strong suit.
Yeah.
And I think Iger has probably been the best combination of both. As one person.
I think part of that has been because whenever you watch, like you had the Imagineering story and all of that, when you watch things like that and you see his interactions with people and you look at what people have said about him as a leader, like he's made mistakes.
Right.
He has absolutely made mistakes, but then he learns from them.
Right.
And then he takes that and says, okay, we don't want to do that again. We don't want to make that mistake again. We learned from that and we grew from that. And taking that like accountability and the grace of like, yeah, we're going to screw up and we're going to make some mistakes, but I'm also going to rely on, hey, you've got expertise in this.
Right.
I'm going to listen to you on that. And so the same way of like developing relationships, right? Developing relationships with leaders of other nations and leaders in other industries and the Imagineers and saying like, what do you need?
Right.
How do we help you? Because one doesn't work without the other.
Right.
And I think he had enough sense and enough good leadership ability to say, okay, this is something I don't know anything about, but you do.
Right.
Tell me about it.
Right.
What do we need to do? And listen to that versus just being like, I'm the boss. This is what we're doing.
Right. And this is something I was thinking about today. Today was actually the anniversary of when my command sergeant major in Iraq died in Iraq. Sergeant Major Donovan Watts. Great story. This is Sergeant Major Donovan Watts, best leader I've ever been around by far. And he gave me two great pieces of advice when it came to leadership. And it was, if you're in a position of leadership, surround yourself with people who have the same common goal, but different ways to get there. And basically, don't surround yourself with yes men. If you surround yourself with yes men, you're only going to follow one path and you're never going to grow. And then the other part was take care of the people underneath you and they're going to take care of you. And I think those are the parts that Iger seems to do well. Like those two things very specifically.
Like because here's the thing, you destroy your lower level cast members and you destroy the lower levels of employment at Disney. Guess what? You're now out of a job at the higher levels because all of those things fell apart at the low level, and now, you got walls crumbling down.
Right.
I mean, it doesn't take much for that to fall apart.
Right.
And so, it is. You take care of the people below you, and they're going to take care of you, and they're going to want to work well. And you just look at good leadership across the board, good management, good leadership, and the number one thing is like, if you give people a reason to want to work well. Right. Like, bring hope back, into what they do. So, okay, we've talked a lot about the leadership aspect and what we've heard and what we know. We know for sure that top two are out. We know for right now CFO is staying. We haven't heard of any other major high up releases.
Speaking of CFO, like, I have bashed on her hard a few times. Like, how she relates to, especially the parks consumer part of it, seems to be kind of out of touch. But I mean, now stories are leaking like into like New York Times and like multiple news outlets, and they're confirming these. She was the one who really led this kind of uprising against Chapek to the board. She was the first one in the board saying that he'd basically lost the room.
I hate to say it, but as a woman who's had to sit in rooms full of men before where they are making decisions and you're one of the only women in there or one of few in a position of leadership. This is just me talking, like, so please, this is just me, thinking out loud here, but like, I hate to think of why she felt the need to lead that uprising.
Right. And the only other thing I will say on that, the head of the board, was also a woman.
Yeah.
So,
but I'm just saying, what kind of leader are you that then that's who is rallying against you? Somebody who was championing you not that long ago.
Right.
And backing your decisions and
right.
So it's what switch flipped at what point.
Right.
There are changes that we really do think we're going to see happen.
Right.
We're already kind of seeing the inklings of happening.
Right.
And
I think a lot of these are also hopes.
I think they're hopes, but there's a couple that I think are pretty sure is going to happen. One of those being, I don't think, again, talking out loud, like looking at the way things are right now and the changes that he's talking about in structure, I don't think we're going to see Imagineering come from California to Florida.
No.
Full time.
Like, they basically wanted to move the whole company to Lake Nona, which is just outside of Orlando. It's kind of in between the airport and Disney World. They've kind of cleared some land, but that's all they've done.
Yeah. But I think that's going to... I think that's one of those big things that's probably going to be reversed. I think they're not going to come out.
I think it is. And if they do, it's going to be on a much, much smaller scale.
Yeah.
I definitely don't.
I mean, it's not that you don't have any, because you do have some Imagineering in Florida, just not...
Right.
Not the scale that you do.
Right. I can see there still maybe being some leadership or a building for the actual company there at Lake Nona, but the big, huge development that they were talking about with neighborhoods and stores and all this stuff, I don't know that that's necessarily going to happen at this point.
One of the questions that I have about what's going to happen and what we think is going to happen is you kind of touched on it before of like, Iger has said this is a strict 2-year contract.
Right.
I'm concerned about the fact that I don't feel like you can do a restructuring of this magnitude in 2 years and also bring somebody else potentially in from the outside and set them up correctly to do this well. So whether you're bringing somebody else up from the inside or you're bringing somebody in from the outside, that either has to happen quickly to allow them the time to be a part of this restructuring and understand the ins and outs of it, or Iger's going to be on for longer. So I'm very curious to see what happens. Are they looking outside? Are they grooming somebody from the inside? Right.
I think, like, the way I read it, if it was going to be somebody from the inside, like, Iger would have came back as kind of the consultant role that he was in before, and they would have promoted that person immediately. I feel like they are going to go outside of what they got right now, unless there is somebody who he's like...
So kind of like Eisner, when Eisner came in and he was an outsider.
Right. Like, maybe there's somebody...
Well, I mean, Iger was an outsider too, but...
No, Iger came up through the company.
Oh, did he?
He was with ABC.
Oh, I guess he was with ABC. Yeah. But he wasn't with Parks and stuff.
I think they're going to find somebody who has connections to Hollywood, somebody who loves the parks, loves the Disney product, and is, no other term, young enough to still connect and move it forward.
Okay, I have a name to put forward. Okay. As you just said that, I have a name to put forward. Okay. And the reason that his name came to mind is because he was just honored with a Disney Award at D23.
Okay.
And he made a speech about applying for a job with Disney and being rejected.
Okay.
Do you know who I'm talking about?
You're talking about Josh Gad?
I'm talking about Josh Gad. Like, how fun would that be to have Josh Gad be the lead, like, of...
That would be fun, but he would definitely have to have a business partner.
Yeah. No, I mean, as far as, like, the creativity level and the, understanding and loving what this company can do.
Right.
As definitely somebody who I think fits that.
Right. I think if it's going to be... Now, when I say somebody from the outside, I mean somebody outside of, like, the executive board that's there right now.
Right.
Right? It might be somebody in one of the other satellite one of the other businesses that Disney owns, right? Like one of the people that hopped in my mind was Kevin Feige from Marvel.
Oh, yeah.
He loves Disney. He loves the parks. And he helped resurrect Marvel.
Yeah.
Do I think that they would necessarily go that way? Not necessarily.
No, but he could be somebody. I think he's going to be somebody who's going to be instrumental in this restructuring.
Right. I think so, too. I don't think he'd take it because he wouldn't be able to wear a hat all the time.
I don't know. I mean, Iger wears a cardigan for crying out loud all the time.
Yeah.
Like, I think... Yeah. Here's my thing. If you're the CEO of Disney, you can pretty much dress however you want. And people are still going to pay attention.
Right.
So I'm not too worried about that.
There are a lot of names that you could throw out there, and it's really 2 years before they're going to take over. But this is what makes this so hard for Iger, right? Is he has to please consumers, he has to please the board, he has to please the stock market, and he has to try and pick someone else and figure out what he did wrong with picking Chapek, so he doesn't make that mistake again, and start to kind of groom them to take over. Like, he has a lot on his plate for 2 years.
But see, and that's why I'm really thinking that we're not going to see a whole lot of, like, big, swift, massive changes. I don't think Genie Plus is going anywhere. I don't think, you're going to see ticket prices go down. I don't think you're going to see, like, these, you might see cast member salaries go up, and wages go up depending on, some restructuring there, bonuses, like better bonuses and stuff at the end of the year or whatever. You may see some changes there, but I don't think you're going to see, like, massive, wide sweeping changes anytime before really January right now.
Oh, no. No, it's going to take a couple of months.
It's going to take a couple of months before we really start seeing anything decent size-wise as far as, like, any sweeping changes other than some personnel changes. Right? Like, you're going to see some personnel changes, and that's... I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, the, like, ones that are going to affect the consumers as well as the employees. And dreaming, though, it's funny... There was one thing that you mentioned earlier. We were talking about this earlier of like, okay, how do we feel about this? What do we want to say? And you made the comment about Tron.
Oh,
and we're dreaming about like, what changes are they going to make? What are they going to do? Like, how is this going to affect it? And it's been all over. Everybody's posted about like, what would you, what would you change? What do you think he's going to change? Like all these things. But you made a comment about Tron that really stuck with me earlier today. What was that?
The fact that Tron has been under construction longer than Chapek was the CEO. They started before he became CEO, and it's still stinking going.
Yeah. And not only that, but I mean, even before he was named as like, when they were like side by side, I mean, like even before it was even like a possibility that he was going to be CEO.
Right.
And I just like, part of me wants to be like, did he hate Tron? Did he just not want to see it happen? Is that
right?
I think we're going to see Tron done as soon as possible.
Right.
I think that's going to be one of those pieces that's going to happen where he's going to be like, we have to get these big things done. And
same thing with Epcot.
Yeah.
I would not be shocked. Like, yes, they've been working on it, but it's kind of been going in waves, right? Mm-hmm. I think they're going to push to get Tron. Like, Tron's dang near done. Like, concrete's down, tracks are going through, like, trains running tests right now. They're just doing small little details, so they don't need a big crew there. Now, I don't know if it's the same construction company that's doing work on Tron and doing the stuff over at Epcot, but I could very easily see them saying, hey, this needs to get done, and it needs to get done now. And he's been more of a risk taker than Chapek was. And he's going to have to throw money at it in order to get it done. But I think that's something he's willing to do, because in the long run, you're going to make that money back if you can open it up sooner.
Well, and especially if again, I don't see Genie Plus going away, as much as there are so many aspects about it that we don't like and we would like to change. And I do think we will see changes to it eventually.
Right. I was going to say, I think there's going to be a reconfiguration of it. And I think there's going to be maybe some perks that go along with it.
Right. But I do think that that alone in the aspect of like the same way I'm like, I'm curious how much they've made in Lightning Lane reservations for Guardians since it opened.
Right.
And, so we're 6 months into Guardians being open, or almost 6 months into Guardians being open. Like, how much money have they made?
Right.
In the last 2 quarters, trying, just on that.
Right.
Not on like what other people brought in or the gift shop or anything like that. Just the Lightning Lanes, and it's going to be huge.
Right.
And so I'm like, okay, great. Spend the couple $1 million to finish this thing up faster. Right. You're going to make it back in the next 6 months.
Right.
Like,
are there any other things other than Genie Plus that you're trying to like kind of keep your eye on? That we hear Genie Plus a lot. Are there any other like parts with the park that you're like, hey, I wonder if this is going to change, or I bet you this changes?
Dining plan. I do think that he's going to bring back more of the all-inclusiveness of that we lost during COVID.
I think we're going to see some of those things that were there before, maybe structured different, but it's going to be easy to get back to those. Right?
Well, I think that the aspect of the all-inclusiveness, you're trying to sell more DVC things, you're trying to do all these things, like make it more inclusive.
Right.
Make it easier to be there and access those things instead of making it harder. Like, great, it's still going to be more expensive than it was 2 years ago or 3 years ago. Like, it just is.
Right.
In the same way it technically was more expensive than the 3 years before that.
Right.
But it's still cheaper to go to a day at Disney than it is to go to the Taylor Swift concert, and that's insane. And a whole other podcast episode.
Right.
But the aspect of like the all-inclusiveness, I think, is going to come back. We really lost that during COVID, and some of that had to happen.
Right.
Initially, totally understand that.
Right.
But I think we're going to see changes to the all-inclusiveness, and I think we're going to see changes to things like park hopping.
Right. That was one of the things I was going to put on there. I think one of the things I'm going to keep my eye on is park hopping. And are we just going to be able to go back to kind of how it was to park hop whenever or sooner, instead of like midday? But I think in order to like completely take away park hopping, you almost have to take away the reservation system. And I don't know.
I don't think they're willing to get rid of the reservation system, but what I wish is that instead of it being such a like, oh, well, you missed out, you can't come in.
Right.
That it was just gave you a scale of like, hey, if you go to this park, it's already a red day.
Right.
Like if they're not actually at capacity. Like, yes, there are times when even before reservations that the parks would be like, nobody's coming in unless somebody comes out.
No. That'd be a good
I'm
idea.
for that, but like, could you do it on a scale? So instead of it just being like it's open or it's closed,
right? Could
it have it's green,
right?
It's yellow, like okay, that park is yellow,
right?
Whatever, or it's red, and it's going to be peak, it's going to be super busy, and so you still get to make a decision about that. Like, and yes, you would still have a point of cutoff, but instead of just being like it's green or it's red, like, give me a scale, and that will probably help you balance those parks better.
Right.
Then, I don't know. There's just, it's like some of the things that they did and changed initially to deal with because of COVID.
Right.
They did them so quickly, and there's just updates and tweaks and things that need to happen. So,
right. One of the other big ones that I want to keep an eye on are perks for resort guests.
But that's part of the thing I'm talking about, the all-inclusiveness too.
Right. It's right now there's just not a lot of perks for if you're staying on property.
There's not, like, other than transportation, that's it.
Yeah, and a little bit of early access, or if you're staying in deluxe, 2 hours every now and then.
Yeah, but it depends on, I mean, if you're going for a 4-day stay,
right?
Forget it. You're not going to get.
Right. You're probably going to miss it. So bringing some of those perks back, which is quite possible because they seem to think, and a lot of economists think, we're going to be facing a recession. And when we faced a recession in 2008, that's one of the things Iger did in order to keep numbers up was all kinds of special discounts for resorts and tickets to try and make sure people kept coming. So that may be coming.
I think he has an understanding more so of what the people who are coming into the parks,
right,
versus what Chapek did, and I think he has a better understanding of like Like there's a balance of, because if you just give everybody what they want,
right,
all the time, it's a never ending game, right? Like we will have an insatiable appetite.
Right.
Like it's not gonna,
right,
it's gonna be never ending. But so there's a balance of what do the people want, and what are we going to give them,
right,
and what are we going to sell them, right? Like what are we going to tell them that they want? And I think he has a good balance of seeing that, of being able to be like, hey, we know you want this thing,
right,
and we're going to sell, like, we're willing to give you something that's as close as we can get. Mm-hmm. Like, it's close, it's right there, it's still going to fill that, like, need, but it's not going to kill us.
Right.
And balancing that better than Chapek did. Chapek just saw...
dollar signs?
Yeah,
There was no empathy.
There was no empathy. I think my biggest hope out of all of this is that this is an eye-opener for him. I hope this is an eye-opener for him. I hope that this is something that allows him to grow as a leader,
right,
and as a person, and allows him to, just to grow. Like, I don't know how else to describe that, but like, that's my hope out of this, is like, as a whole, that this will just be good for everybody, including him, including Kareem, like including, anybody else who's potentially going to be let go because of this. So
right. I think we could sit there and keep talking about this and going down rabbit holes all night long. I would love to hear what you all have to say about it, and you can find us on Twitter and Instagram at Salute to the Ears.
And if Twitter goes down, we will still be on Instagram.
Yep. We made it through the weekend. We might be okay.
We might be okay.
But share your ideas with us. You can DM us. I'm on Twitter like every day, usually posting something. It might just be a good morning, but I usually try to get on there a couple times a day at least and post something.
But yeah, we want to hear from you guys. We want to hear from you guys what you love. And I think we're gonna head off from here. But have a great week, you guys. Go out and find your joy.
And have a magical week.